Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, listeners. I've got a very energetic Stephen Dickson with me this morning. He was thinking that I should be introducing the show in the manner of a boxing announcer. But I think we'll save that. We'll save that for a few weeks'
until next
time.
week, Chris.
Yeah, we'll save that.
You can work up the energy.
Lovely to see you again.
Good morning.
You are looking fantastic this morning, son. Fresh. Look at that. Ain't got a line on you. It's been a great week. You obviously had a good week.
10:45 Saturday morning. We're good to go.
Yeah. Well, maybe, Stephen, in the domestic tip, we'll be able to tell other viewers how to look as good as Stephen on a Saturday morning.
Chris, it won't take long. We've scheduled 3 seconds for that section.
All right, we'll do that. Now, listen, I've got another bit of news. I've been Donald.
You've been Donald.
I've been Donald. Do you know how much I love an acronym?
There's two Donalds I know. There's Trump and the Duck. So let's hope it's Trump.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to work out sometimes. Well, I'm not going to say anything to that. But anyhow, I've been Donald. Okay, you know how I love an acronym. He's only come out with a better one, the CARES Act.
Very good.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or anybody else, but the Coronavirus Air Relief and Economic Security Act.
Very good.
But he's done that, yeah. But, I mean, fair play to him. He's trying to do what he can for the aviation industry, as we all should. So, Stephen, let's get straight into it. Now, we are moving away from that term that's well overused now, the new normal, and now we're on planned positives. So now, with things starting to warm up a little bit and people starting to get a little bit excited now that things are changing, obviously, one of the conundrums that's going to have to happen is all the aircraft storage. So, you know, the pictures that everybody's been so familiar with, seeing all these aircraft everywhere. I mean, that's a logistics nightmare in itself, huh?
Indeed, yeah. Last in, first out. But of course, there's aircraft all over the place. I mean, as well, of course, as being parked in legitimate airfields. There are airfields that are being used for storage that haven't been used for commercial traffic for quite some time, and therefore lack a fair bit of infrastructure that one would want in terms of support network and support systems, maintenance capability, etc. to support the restart. But also, you've got aircraft that have essentially being entered into storage. You look at some of the scenes that we've seen, particularly across the US. And there's just hundreds of aircrafts lined up. So I hope the fella that sort of parks in the middle doesn't want to get out first.
Exactly.
He might have a problem. But these are in storage fields, that are pretty used to doing that kind of thing. So I'm sure they're more than capable, Chris, of handling that logistically. I mean, the US, if you think back to North America after the devastating events of 9/11. There were aircraft parked everywhere. I mean, in places that they would never normally have been. I think actually the statistic from that time was that wasn't it one of the was it Gander or one of these fields up in North Canada? It becomes the busiest airport in the world with parked aircraft movements. But I think they've got that probably quite well down pat, and I'm sure that'll take good process and good effect.
No, good. And now that brings me to another issue and something that's always been a problem at airports is equipment storage. And who's actually responsible for it? Where should the pallets and containers be stored? Who should be looking after them? Why are they all over the place? So again, there's been a big
perennial problem of the industry, Chris.
But a huge challenge now that's come to light. And now also with the reduction in fleet sizes and everything, there's going to be ample equipment everywhere now.
Indeed.
Well, there should be.
Indeed. I mean, I think this lends itself to an opportunity to. I mean, I think there have been some good examples that we've seen in industry where carriers, actually, or airports for the most part, but airports as the landlord or the site owner, has been the responsible authority, if you like, in terms of managing its available real estate, to and right size it for the size and shape of the ground handling community. However, we know that there have been efforts to pool. There have been some good examples. Best examples I can cite in Schiphol. I think Schiphol's done a grand job over the years in equipment pooling. Sort of brought the community together. Ground handlers don't generally always work well together. You know, there are some competitive tensions there, and there should be commercially, but from an operational perspective, I think there are some good examples that we've seen about that already. Luton in the UK have also done some good stuff, but I think that's on a very small scale. I think now that we will have you know, not just a little bit of excess, but we will have there's a plethora of
word of the week.
Word of the week, plethora. Well, it fits with your planned positives, Chris. So we get planned positives plethora.
Oh,
Plethora
beautiful.
of planned positives. But back to my point, you know, there will be massive amounts of excess equipment, and therefore, is this a time for us to actually look at the state of the equipment, look at the state of the nation, start testing, you know, the validity of, or the hypotheses of does every ground handler need its own set of kit? You know, what does that do? What does that do to you know, ground handlers in terms of their capital positions and you know, sort of the assets on the books? You know, in the real world, where we've seen, you know, we'll see a very slow ramp up, and airports have got, you know, massively you know, reduced volumes. There might be an opportunity. Maybe this is a catalyst to start looking more broadly at what we can do in terms of pooling or finding. I mean, pooling might not be the only solution, but there might be other solutions there to right size the you know, to right size the equipment and size and shape, and that of course gives better safety outcomes. You know, it gives better behavioural outcomes. It also gives better financial outcomes, one would assume, providing the airport has the right model. If the airport's trying to screw over the ground handler, then or make a buck out of it, then it's not the right model. But if it's done with the right intention, you know, then I think there can be some good come from this.
Yeah, and also being able to track all the equipment, which is possible now, and making it, you know, a lot more efficient. It's good for everybody. But like you said, it has to be from a collaborative perspective.
Yeah,
has to be.
Yeah.
Now that also brings into one of the questions that we got this week, which is from a guy called Frank. Why do airports and carriers not pool their equipment, you know, or look at central organisation and structure of equipment run by an airport?
Well, look, I mean, airlines, I think, you know, have been overly prescriptive on the odd occasion, Chris, as you and I might know well.
Yes.
And they prescribe inputs rather than outcomes. And so I think there's a couple of things to happen here. One is we need to switch the balance to actually outcome-driven measures and standards, and not measures, but standards, but outcome-driven approach to give much more flexibility to the contracted GSPs, the ground service providers. You know, give them some more flexibility. So actually, you know, if the outcome is you know, deliver you know, first bag to the bag room at, you know, plus 10 minutes after arrival for first and business class customers. Well, what you don't have to explain to the ground handlers is that they must have X number of bits of kit on the airplane. They must provide X, because actually the loads these days are going to be so variable. You know, that actually allow the ground handler to right size. There's a lot of airlines doing this already, but still too many prescribing number of people on a turn, number of
that's
turn,
ridiculous.
What door must be open, what must do first. Let the experts kind of, you know, work through that. So first what's going to happen is airlines going to become more trusting, and that's a big switch in the relationship, which I think will be a positive thing for the ground service providers. The second thing that needs to happen, therefore, is I guess we need to, you know, start looking at the, you know, the overall kind of arrangements, you know, commercially, contractually, operationally, in terms of, you know, how does industry now get better outcomes, you know, in this I was going to say new normal, but that's obviously
plan positives.
That's ancient history now, Chris.
Yeah.
But we've got to start getting more empowerment of our you know, people and the like to sort of drive some of this stuff. So I don't know what your view is from that perspective, but I think
from what you just said, like, you know, if you were to have a new whiteboard, and you're looking at airports now wanting to attract customers, you know, attract carriers, etc. If they were able to say, look, you know, we know now what the standards are, what everybody wants, and these are the standards of the airport, and this is what we now put as a guideline to all of our tenants. If they actually had the coordinated oversight and responsibility for all of the equipment, and it was managed centrally, and it was also checked centrally, so you could see where it was stored, why do you see so many units on the ground, you know, why are they left open in winds, and all sorts of the things that happen. that people don't see because they're so busy. If the airports had more of an oversight of their own environment, I think it would be, be something that could work.
So the reason, so the first part was about the ground handler and the airline relationship. The second bit that I was just coming on to sort of to get your view on the first part. The second part, Chris, is sort of saying, how does, airports and airlines have historically been rather untrusting of one another.
Yep.
And I'm speaking, sort of fairly candidly, as you and I always do in these Saturday sessions.
That's what makes the day better.
We do that anywhere, Chris, not just here on Saturday morning.
Exactly.
But look, there has to be a better level of trust engendered between the two parties, and move away from each trying to sort of shirk the other one, and so I think the community, the ground handlers and the airlines will certainly be nervous about entrusting the airport with more.
Yeah.
And that's right. I think they're right to be nervous. So I think that would be my default position if I were in an airline or ground handler. However, again, providing the right outcomes are providing the right sort of we approach this with the right with a sensible head, and the right sort of mentality, which I suspect that this crisis has given us all a bit more time to be kind and caring and a bit better in our thought process, rather than trying to screw somebody else over for the benefit of oneself.
Yeah.
I think there might be some mileage in it. But look, airports necessarily own it. I tell you what it would do, Chris, just thinking out loud on the hoof a little bit here. But whilst of course there'll be a glut, this plethora of equipment around the world, there will be a lot of old crap there that needs to probably be retired or particularly in the North Americas that have got terribly old equipment, bad standards for many years. I'm not casting aspersions on some of the great ground handlers there, but North America compared to the rest of the world is in a pretty shoddy place when it comes to GAC and kit. What I would say is there will be some replacement programs possible, going into this to get some of these better standards. Now, capital is going to be a problem for ground handlers. The leasing model, we've already seen some people are sort of questioning, is GC leasing and operating leases the right way forward? So, that's been a big push over the last 10 years, and a lot of ground handlers have transitioned more less owned and more leased, as airlines have done typically over the time as well. However, that imbalance may sort of, come back to being a bit more normalized. What that means is that ground handlers that have gone through this terrible crisis along with everybody else, they won't have much cash in their pockets. One of the things that airports might want to consider is airports might not necessarily want to be the final arbiter, but airports might be the asset owner that take away some of that capital. The other good thing it does from an air service development perspective is some of these new ports, and we'll see from this come a change in the dynamic of travel. The hub and spoke system is going to come under some pressure, I suspect. And more direct flying on next generation fuel efficient aircraft, much better unit cost is probably the way forward. What that means is that routes that were never possible before economically now potentially become so. But when you're looking at some of these smaller ports, for an airport to attract that airline, they are relying on a ground handler to do a deal with the airline at the same time. Now, what often happens is the airport and the airline negotiate. The airline ground operations people or the cargo operations people will never know about the bloody new route until the last minute. Say, we're going to fly to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, thanks. When did I get? Have you announced it? Yeah, we'll announce it commercially tomorrow. Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah. So, of course, at that stage, you've lost your commercial leverage. Yeah. However, wouldn't it be much better for the ecosystem at the airport to come together?
Yeah.
Try to support that airline with its new entry. And therefore come up with a coordinated set of commercials and service outcomes. That might be something to tap into. I'm sure there are some airports that are doing it. If any of our listeners know, some of those good examples where that works already, then I'd be keen certainly to know more.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's a great opportunity. It also gives me the chance to out-Trump Trump, because my acronym of CARES would be consider all responsibilities everywhere systematically. And this is a great opportunity for airports to systematically start to do something now for the whole community. Like you said, the ecosystem of an airport. I
would just say also, Chris, it doesn't take much to outwit Trump. So I'm sure you can out-Trump Trump pretty easily too.
Yeah, I didn't say anything when you said there are two Donalds. See, I'm the diplomatic side of the relationship.
Well,
so I'm just happy I'm just happy to have out-trumped him. Anyhow, moving on. So that's the question. So Frank, that's a good question, and like I said, I think it makes an awful lot of sense, especially now, and it would do so much. And what you were saying about people not trusting each other, that's something now that this crisis has brought along. You know, get rid of all the legacy waste, all the problems, start doing things properly, and being a little bit more logical and throwing that common sense back in.
Yeah,
so I think that's
absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, we've got another one. So I was going to ask you, from an airlines, airports and GHA perspective, now that the reboot is happening, what are the positives and what still needs to be done? So I think we'll save that question just for a couple of minutes, because I got a question from Inder, and what he's saying here is that experienced personnel are the most expensive. So they are now being targeted for redundancy. This surely is short-sighted.
Yeah, look, difficult one.
So but what I'd like you to do is I want you to answer this now from a business perspective.
So I'm already there, Chris. I'm already there. I'm there.
And then I'll do the person perspective.
So I'm doing the business part.
Yeah. So like I said, the hard, the bad one, the good one. Just got to work out which is which now.
But look, you say that, Chris. I mean, we say that tongue in cheek, and of course, this is tragic for the people that are losing their jobs. And we've all been through. I mean, no events of this magnitude, but we've all been at risk of redundancy in our careers. I suspect. Certainly, know you and I have, and doing restructures, and these are devastating times for everybody. However, whilst I might answer with my business hat on, and you can be the empathetic, friendly, personal response, I don't think that discounts businesses acting properly, above the board, transparently, and I always put myself in the sort of the shoes, or use the ideologies in. If I were in that employee's shoes, and if I'm the employer, then how would I want to feel? How would I want to be spoken to? How would I want to be engaged with? How would I want to be communicated? What are the things that I might like to know? Because actually, when you put yourself in that person's shoes, it becomes a much better kind of proxy for the feeling, or the as a sort of a temperature check across the business. If you're sitting there as a hard-nosed bean counter, and there are many of them, not just in our business, but business. And we need bean counters. The sad thing is there are less beans to count currently, which makes them a little bit more nervous, I suspect, than they normally would be.
Exactly.
But Chris, there has to be a process for this stuff. There can't be. So whilst I understand, our questioner's sort of point that he might be at the top end of the scale, and therefore as a target, where some of the lower entrants are more junior workers or the less tenure, got lower time served, they're obviously more economically viable. I understand that entirely. But look, when you think this is your business, so for the employer to feel the employee shoes, the employee sometimes has to put themselves in the shoes of the employer. Yep. So if this was your business and you were the 100% shareholder and you had to do the right things, then there would be some things that would be bloody difficult and are hard for us all to do, because there's nothing worse than having to sacrifice good people. However, in the greater good, to ensure the viability of the organization and to ensure the viability and the success of the younger generations, because those young kids at the bottom of that tree, they might well just have started out in that job and they might well be cheaper employees. But I tell you what, Chris, in this tough world going forward, I think it's much harder for a lot of younger people with less kind of stripes or war scars or whatever, stripes or war scars, to actually probably go back into industry and find another job than it would be for somebody with 20 years time served.
Yeah.
Got a lot of skills and value to add to that. So I'll just say to Inder, was it Inder the gentleman?
Yeah, Inder.
Sorry, to ask. Look, I think you've got to see this both ways. And as regrettable as it is, try also to see what benefit you can take to other organizations where you can add some of those other skills. Maybe the other organizations are lacking some of the more startup or junior firms in our business. There will be opportunities. I know it's tough, but I think it starts with the employer and the employee seeing it from both lenses. That's really important.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, from the personal side, obviously, because I was having a discussion with somebody during the week, and it got onto this because two people that we both knew are both now affected. Now, the feelings are, of bitterness, pain, there's frustration, there's worry, there's financial woes, what's going to happen with the kids, all the things that come down on people. And it's a terrible, terrible position to be in, especially when it's through no fault of your own. Then we started talking about choice of purchases. And would you buy something from one country than another, subject to the price and the cost? Which supermarkets do you visit? All these things came into it, which we didn't think about, but it all has the same or a similar effect. So what you're saying is the economics of running a business and doing things well, especially when it goes through cycles of, things being so fine margins and so close to the line because of people wanting market share and people going in too low on contracts that are not sustainable. That has to be readjusted at certain points. Now, this has just brought everything to the fore, and it's made it very difficult. Now, I understand what you're saying about the youngsters and about the elder ones, and then also about the way you'd like to be communicated, because people have got an idea of what they want to know, but they've also got a sort of a hidden sort of reception of what they actually want to hear or what they actually hear. And it's then the emotions that come in, which are terrible. If they're able to stand back, one of the things that's definitely going to happen is there is going to be now some right sizing, resizing, downsizing, whatever label people want to put on it. But I think what people should now start to think is, how long is this going to happen for? What options do I have? And what I think, and this is just something on a personal note now, I think every company that's making certain people redundant through having to do the right thing, which is sometimes a very hard thing, they should try and keep people connected. So for everybody living in the UK, every evening on the news, you see the Prime Minister and the politicians all standing behind podiums with little messages. And the message I'd like to see some of these companies giving now to people that are going to be affected, whether it's well received or not, but from a genuine perspective, is stay connected, support yourself, and save knowledge. And if these companies did certain training and certain online communication over a period of time that was seen to be a time whereby people might still want to come back in, it would be a way of just throwing them a lifeline that they could keep pulling along until such time as they found something. And I'm sure, like you would agree, that anybody from our industry who goes anywhere else, those industries or those companies are going to be very, very impressed, because they're going to see people that are disciplined, work within procedures, understand safety and security very well, know what quality is all about, customer focused. They're going to see wonderful people. And it's just a matter now of letting those people feel wonderful and see that there are opportunities, but by staying connected, supporting themselves and saving their knowledge, it's a way back into the industry that a lot of them actually do love.
I concur entirely, Chris. One thing I just add there is I like the sort of the analogy or the sort of the image of businesses presenting and sharing more data in a 5 p.m. style kind of update, whether it's a 10-minute kind of stand up in the morning at a briefing at 8 o'clock in the morning, or a shift start, or it's a management session with the teams and every day. And actually, one of the things that business has not done very well, for the most part, some of course there are some exceptions to everything, but is actually share financial performance with the employees.
Yes.
And I think that it's a double-edged sword. What has happened, and again we speak honestly here, but what has happened is, of course, businesses has been cautious to share too much, because when it comes to negotiating things like pay agreements, pay settlements, collective bargaining agreements, enterprise bargaining agreements, whatever they're called in the various parts of the world, with the trade union representatives, they're afraid of giving away too much information in terms of the success of that, or otherwise of that business, so as to protect the negotiating hand. So I understand that caution. Conversely, however, you can't then expect the union officials or those that are there to help negotiate on behalf of the employees, whether they're officials or the reps or whomever, to come in with an open hand when it comes to having a conversation with management about how dire it is and how awful it is and how tragic it is for us. When over the last 10 years, you've never shared bloody anything with us because you've been cautious about giving away too much. Now, there has to be some middle ground there. So again, it's about some and and look, some businesses, again, some unions have done this really very well. But I would say there has been a lot of criticism of some firms in the press very publicly by the public. There's campaigns, there's petitions, there's select committees, there's MPs, all with an opinion about these firms that are just trying to stay alive, Chris. And that's got to stop. This witch hunt against companies that are tragically in the shit in this terrible, terrible crisis that nobody asked for has to stop. Conversely, the employee representatives then have to actually be given and sharing some tangible information that will allow them to educate, coach, and sort of get to outcomes with their membership that are meaningful and sustainable. And when the good times return, maybe the pay deals will return too.
Yeah, and in a different light. And I think I agree with you, Steve. I think it's also an opportunity to have a different model. So, like for the understanding of what is profit and what is profit that has to be maintained to allow sustainability and continuity. So maybe a different factor before you could say. And people have been saying that some of these companies can only last for 30 days, 90 days, 141 days, etc. Well, that's a terrible thing to think that you work for a company that, God forbid, something went wrong. They've only got X amount of days left. And anybody who's working with their own domestic budgets, that you have to have a certain amount of savings just in case something goes wrong.
Well, the degree of suspicion, Chris, that exists between those on the employee representation side and those on the business are equal in part. They're suspicious of one another. What we should be doing is being as candid and frank as maybe not as we are on these conversations, but open book transparency as far as practicably possible. We have to understand there's a competitive slant to opening up, some of this stuff too much because these discussions are porous. Unfortunately, you have to accept that what you negotiate in a room, sadly these days with these groups is the next.
It spreads quicker than sometimes before everybody gets out of the room.
Therefore, you understand the mistrust that exists on both parts.
Yeah, but it's an opportunity now again to do things differently. And again, using the word cares, if there's a systematic change and there's a better understanding, then hopefully people will be more realistic.
Yeah.
But I still think it would be a shame for so many people to be displaced from this industry. So to have that lifeline, stay connected, support yourself, save knowledge, it then gives people a direct access back in if they want to at any time within the next 2 to 3 years. And I think that's really important. So good man, Inda, and good luck, because obviously the way the question was written, it looks like you're affected. So hopefully everything will work out well for you. Now, I've got another one here, Steve, from a guy called Barry. I have flown twice in the last 2 weeks, so I'm assuming it's in and out, and many people still not wearing masks on flights. I don't understand this, Steve. I just think, for goodness sake, why do people not make a decision when you're making your booking, when you check it in, when you get to an airport? Sorry, you do not come into this premises, let alone get onto an aircraft that's got a stand attached to any of our facilities, unless you're wearing a mask. And then to save any problems on flights for the crew in the cabin address when they get on, to say, as everybody's aware, this flight is a blah, 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 a CARES flight or whatever, and everybody is requested and directed to wear masks for the entirety of the flight.
Well, a few things there. Let's unpick it. There's probably a couple of different parts. One is the enforcement and the policing of it, which sadly will come down to our wonderful cabin crew in industry. Some great people in the business that over their many years of experience in working in aviation, Chris, will have dealt with the most pompous, arrogant passengers in their time, and people that don't listen, that betray the rules. And also, I think what we've seen more recently is betray their peers. There's peer pressure from other customers about doing the right thing whether it be about stowing cabin baggage properly, or being rude to a crew member, or disobeying a fasten seatbelt sign.
Yeah.
So crew are very well, I'd say, not trained with it, they're trained clearly, but they're very well, they're very capable of dealing with these misdemeanors and enforcements on board. However, I don't know that on a 5-hour domestic, east-west, flight, that if somebody wants to eat or somebody wants to drink, and they remove their mask, then are we going to stop them? Are we going to stop them removing their mask? There has to be a degree of reasonableness. How long can you have your mask off for? What if the person next to me gets uncomfortable and starts kicking off? Is it him that's in trouble for kicking off, or is it me for not wearing my mask because I want to eat a sandwich? Is it so unreasonable that I can eat a sandwich on board the aircraft? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So look, there is an element of that will come into. So so there's enforcement, there's the peer group, the peer pressure. The third part then is sort of saying, look, how do we then deal with these individuals, or how do we sanction them? How do we ensure that these measures that are being enforced by both the airline or the cabin crew and the peers, to a large part, the passengers themselves, who will make you feel you're not wearing a mask. What do we then do with them? Is it a federal offence in the United States not to wear a mask on the airplane? Is it offence against the I can't remember the legislation in the UK, but the new act legislates again public transport. It went into the Railways Act. It's gone into aviation. Public transport. So how does that work? And then what about people turning up at airports or on an aircraft that don't have a mask or have left a mask at home? Oh, how long should the mask be replaced? If you're on a train journey from the north of England for 4 hours down to Heathrow, well, when you enter there, should you put a new mask on? Some of our dear, wonderful peers in the human race, Chris, will wear the same mask for 5 or 6 days. Disposable paper mask. That ain't the way it's supposed to be done. How many masks does one take on a trip with them? Lots of questions, not many answers. Over to you, Chris.
Steve, I was just waiting for you to say yes. I agree. My point is there should be clearer directions, and there's not.
It's tough. It's tough
for the poor old cabin crew. You know what I'm saying? If there isn't a clear directive that says, blank, when you're on an aircraft, you must wear your mask. Obviously, you should be allowed to take it off to eat or drink. But the main principle is that for the majority of the time, if you're not eating or drinking, you should have it on.
Yeah.
For the purpose of caring about others. And I think that's something. But if there's clear, and I agree with you, there's so many questions that you can make about anything, but there just needs to be more clarity. And this principle of politicians and authorities leaving a certain degree of understanding to the common man or common woman, it just doesn't work. People need rules, they need guidelines, they need to know what's acceptable. Otherwise, there's an underbelly of conflict just waiting to erupt because so many people are frustrated with what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
That brings us neatly into the next one, which is the 2-meter rule. And a guy called Jeff is saying, now that the 2-meter rule is being questioned or is possibly being reconsidered, why is it not being done quicker so that businesses and everywhere else can actually benefit? And then there was something I couldn't quite read, but it was to do with toilets. So even going to toilets, they're normally so close to each other. I don't mean the cubicles now, but I mean the men's, the ladies, the disabled and whatever else options there is. And to be walking past each other, it's virtually impossible to have a 2-meter.
I think 2 meters is where possible, Chris. I think that there's nothing that says it's absolutely mandated, as far as I can see. It's where it's possible to socially distance 2 meters, one should. And if one can't, one wears a mask.
Then mask.
Very simple. Now, if the public can't understand that and they expect a handbook from their respective governments, something is wrong. So I think we all got to take some personal responsibility on this stuff, and it's not for me to comment if 2 meters is the right number. I'm not a scientist, but of course there is discussion. But whether it's 1 or it's 1.5 or it's 2 or 0 going forward, let's hope. So I would say people should take personal responsibility. If you can't socially distance, I've been very careful here, but walking out or going for a walk in the park or walk along the river, where you have to kind of cross somebody, You know, I've had some ladies get very excited, agitated about my presence, and
well, I was going to comment there, Steve, but I best not.
And suggest that that I was breaking the 2 meters with a handout. That's just not necessary. The more that you remonstrate with somebody up close and personal, the more that you're in their space. So keep on walking and keep moving. There's no point picking a fight with people. We're all in this together. If people are a bit kinder and care for each other a little bit more, I think we'll do just fine.
I'm gonna ask Salem just to cut that little bit out so I can keep it always on my phone or keep pressing it. You know?
About me talking about the ladies getting excited, or
exactly. Yeah, well done. But there's a reason for that.
Ramani agrees.
There's a reason for that. It's AESOP.
AESOP. What do you know about AESOP? What do you know about AESOP, Chris? Goodness.
AESOP,
I'm not sure that any AESOP stuck to your face.
No, there's no AESOPs here, mate. That's for sure. But I understand it's a little unknown secret of men in this country. But if you rub a little bit of that on every day, you look like yourself. And I mean, for a man of 52, you look incredibly well.
You said I was like Benjamin Button last week, so I'm not sure.
Exactly, yeah. The Australian mystery cure, AESOP. Everybody, get out and get some.
Gosh, my habits are well known.
They are now.
We've often travelled too much together, Chris.
Exactly.
Good stuff.
Just to finish now, any positives you'd like to end on?
Look, I think we're starting to see some. I mean, when we spoke last week, a little bit of uncomfortableness with some cases rising again in China. I think overall positively, I think we've seen some very good results in Europe and Asia, in certainly in North Asia, and Southeast Asia. India, South Asia, sadly rising. I think South America's got some challenges on its hands. But overall, I think in if I can say sort of the developed world in Western Europe and we're seeing some good response. So I hope that confidence now, with transmission reducing and the cases reducing, that we'll see some returns, and actually some really good announcements in the last couple of weeks about returning to capacity in July, and I think that's all very welcome. I think some air bridges will be developed and announced in the next week or so. I had a very good conversation with the chair of the Health Select Committee this week, Jeremy Hunt, in relation to some other policy pieces that they remain challenging government on their response, and I think that's good and overwhelmingly positive in terms of the Select Committee's approach. That differs massively to the Transport Committee, I have to say. So that's good. So I think we're seeing some good stuff going on, Chris. I hope that continues, not just here in the UK, but overall. But certainly the green shoots of positivity and capacity returning are well evidenced.
Yeah, and now also it's how we do it collectively and working together in collaboration, which Indeed. will make even more of a difference. Stephen, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. Now, just before we finish, domestic tip of the week.
I'm going to surprise you.
Go on then.
I'm going to surprise you. There's no real tip of the week, but what I wanted to do actually was make a sort of a connection between how long this lockdown has gone on and how much washing one has to do during this period. Yeah. And so I bought a box of 26 Persil capsules at the beginning of the 13-week lockdown, and the box is now empty, which suggests that my washing machine is running twice per week. I would take that as a lesson to myself that I'm probably doing one load a week too many for a man that's here on his own, and I should probably be reducing that to one load per week, which reduces the strain on the environment and these chemicals into the water course.
Fantastic. And now what are you going to do with the box?
I'll keep that for my son, because we make things with these things,
Yeah?
Yeah.
You should also get some pebbles.
I don't live near the beach.
No, but and you buy a bag of them in a garden centre.
Oh no, I don't buy anything, Chris.
You could buy pebbles, okay? And then
Scotsman normally acquire things.
And then yeah. I heard the other day.
Acquiring a bottle of whiskey, Chris, or a.
But listen, I was walking with the dogs the other day, and a Scotch fella walked past, And then we seen him the second time and he burst out laughing. He said, "You know," he said, "if a Scotsman meets a stranger 3 times in a day, he has to buy him a drink."
Okay.
And as I was walking, I was sure I heard rustling in the bushes and he was hiding. Right, Steve, as always, my friend, it's a pleasure. Now we got something that everybody will now know: planned positives plethora. Very easy to say, unless you've had a drink. And look forward to seeing you next week. Stay well. Keep rubbing that AESOP on. It's doing wonders. And we'll see you next week. Thanks very much.
This is the Saturday show with Chris and Stephen, sponsored by AESOP.
Well, it is. It makes a change from Wizz Air.
Cheers, Chris. Have a great day.
You too. All the best, Steve.
Best wishes, everyone. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.